Welcome, Mr. Ram.
Yep.
I would like to start off by asking you about your career trajectory. Could you tell us a little bit about your educational background and when did you realize that you have this knack for understanding numbers, and did you ever dream of being a CFO?
Very interesting one, but as I look around the room, I realize I must have started working much before anybody was born here, right? Everybody's less than 25 for sure. Looks like that. I actually did engineering. Nothing to do with finance, right? So I did mechanical engineering when I was your age, passed with distinction. And it was a traditional career path at that time that you did engineering and MBA, because to be very upfront, we were not as aware as you kids are. You actually have access to so much information, so much knowledge, and you can have learned experiences. When we studied engineering, did MBA. That was my traditional career path. And I didn't do an MBA in finance as well. I did an MBA in marketing. Right. So I did an MBA in marketing. I was actually product manager for a paints company, FMCG marketing. So it was said then you have to do sales, then marketing. So I did sales, marketing. Went on to do a credit card product manager role in ICICI Bank, then a product manager role in Citibank. And then when I went to Citi, it so happened there was a high potential candidate course, something like a graduate program, right? But a senior level graduate program, next rung of leaders for the firm. So I did 18 months stints in front office, back office, and finance. And when I did FP&A in finance, the CFO said, "You're too good. You should stay in finance." That's how I ended in finance. But if you ask me, when did you realize you had a knack for numbers? Very, very interesting question. Because when I did some of my fantastic promotions in ICICI Bank in 2004, it was extremely successful. But my line manager specifically told me, when we conceptualized the promotion, when you looked at the data, when you looked at the target market, when you looked at the segment we should do, and then you came down to the numbers and you did the order modeling, and when it actually played out, the joy for you was more in seeing that play out than doing the promotion itself. Whereas he was all about ideas. I was all about numbers. And he said, one day you will end up in numbers. That really struck a chord with me. But it turned out that you find your way. And I want to emphasize this. Nobody knows what you will end up doing, but use all the experiences you get to understand holistically. You never know what will be applicable when, right? So some people tell me that I'm being a product management approach to finance. That's fine. All experiences get to making the business successful. That's all. It's not one thing cuts all. So numbers, analytics, I did engineering with distinction, so obviously I love numbers then as well. But it's applicable across everywhere. You don't have to be a hardcore finance person, accounting person. What you need to bring to the table is curiosity. You need to have a willingness to learn and then adapt. And it can work in anywhere, any function.
That's very interesting. And there's this idea floating around. So most finance students think that finance attracts only very analytical and risk-averse minds. But you've thrived in an industry that's fundamentally about human behavior, which is dressed up as mathematics. What do you think people misunderstand about what finance really is?
So finance is not only a back office number crunching function. We have to be very clear about this. It is about making a difference. Yes, as a CFO, as the conscience keeper for the firm, I'm responsible for the numbers. And I have a primary responsibility to show to the external audience that the numbers are not cooked up, it's absolutely right, it's accurate, so on and so forth. But that's one aspect of finance. Ultimately, everybody has to make a difference in the business, help business grow. Only then we can have finance only if the business is around, right? So the thing is not about being an analytical person. Everybody has to take risks. The biggest thing is being a risk taker. But when you take risks, how do you understand those risks? Are you able to minimize your losses? If you don't take risks, there's no money to be made, right? So the thing about numbers is a fundamental thing across even banking, I would say. Even if you do sales or anything, as long as you can tell the number story, you'll really succeed. So don't assume finance is some shy person sat behind a desk somewhere doing some number crunching and they publish results and they are really back office people. Now, more than any time before, finance is more a front facing role, right? I don't spend, obviously, at least at my level, doing any transactional activity. I just spend my time with people. So your people skills are more than necessary. How can you influence decisions? How can you convey the full story? So numbers is only one part of it. How you make sense of the numbers to non-finance people, how can they actually take it forward and implement it in their activity? That is more critical, right? So risk-taking ability is very crucial, and it is not about being risk-averse. If you're risk-averse, don't be in business, right? If you have to take calculated risks and succeed and build the control environment to succeed in that risk-taking ability.
I think that's a very good message, especially for finance and accounting students. So, of course, you have to be good with the fundamentals, but it's not only about being good with the fundamentals. As Mr. Ram said, you'll have a lot of talking to do, clients to meet, even if you work in consulting jobs. So one must also focus on people skills, speaking, making presentations. Mr. Ram, for those of students who are not very familiar about what FP&A is, could you break it down, and what would an average work week look like for a newly graduated student who's part of financial planning and analysis?
FP&A is one aspect of finance, right? So in the team that I manage, let's say we have people in financial control. These people do the general ledger, bookkeeping, reporting, regulatory reporting, group reporting, so on and so forth. Then I have a treasury function, so the treasurer faces out to the market, and they have a middle office, back office, and then we have product control. Then we have people who run information, business intelligence, right? Provide reports to front office, work alongside them. And there's FP&A. And FP&A is a mix of things, right? So I like to give this example very much. If you think of a car, and then you think of the car, the absolute essential for a car is the engine, right? So the heart of the car is, I would say, financial control. It keeps you honest. It is financial control. But ultimately, FP&A is something like the steering wheel. It steers the business back in the right direction. It's like the seat belt and the brakes. If they're going wrong, not taking the right risks, or not spotting the opportunities to put the brake, or even the headlight to look into the future, right? So FP&A provides you a window into the future. There is budgeting and planning, which to say how much will you do and how you track against the budget. And there is decision management, where you look at analytics and what kind of numbers, why are they flowing. So, and the most important thing is business partnering. What do you do with the information, and how do you influence business to actually act on that information, right? So it's not only information, be it pricing, be it product management. You can translate what activities the business does and what it means for the financials. So that there's a big aspect of understanding finance and taking it to business and making a difference. So that is the single biggest bridge that FP&A crosses. And the thing with beauty with FP&A is you're not constrained, because you're not doing actual number report. You're looking into the future, you're looking at possibilities, you're looking at what are the business opportunities, so you can weave the story. And I'll tell you many stories as we go through today, because I'm the biggest skill, and you will all find it surprising, to succeed in FP&A or actually in anything in this current corporate world is storytelling. It is how you understand a problem, or you understand a situation, and how do you explain, how do you weave your story and find a solution. So that's the single biggest skill. So simply functions, budgeting and planning, let's say business partnering, decision support, MI and so forth. But ultimately it all comes together in the sense that it is the brains of the business. How do we move the business forward? So that's FP&A.
You spoke a bit about budgeting, and when everyone thinks about finance, they think about finance as predicting the future, making forecast. But you're dealing with a lot of incomplete information and at times black swan events. For instance, we had the COVID crisis. How do you make decisions when you know your models could be wrong?
See, I won't say models could be wrong. The single biggest skill of a leader is to take decisions with incomplete information. If you had 100% of information, everybody would take the same decision. or you look back and say, I always should have done something like this. So the critical thing is to be able to use your experiences, use your judgment to take, again, like I said, it's a risk-based approach. It is not a 100% certainty approach. It's a risk-based approach, and that's why you get paid to be a leader. You take a call and you live by your call. But you look at all sort of possibilities which can lead to the decision outcome. So stay aware and take an informed decision. There is no decision which is a 100% certainty decision. There isn't. If it's all black and white, it would not work out. So COVID is a classic example. And I'll tell you, when I spoke of FP&A, I think I should have mentioned scenario planning. How many people here in the room understand scenario planning, scenario management? Good. There are a couple of people, right? So, okay, good. So let me give you this classic example. So when I, maybe in my first analyst role, right? So when I got my first analyst role, I used to do stress testing for the firm. And this is a significant MNC with significant profits in India, right, back then. I used to do it in an Excel sheet. And we were doing scenario planning. We would start in Jan and we would end by June. And I would reach out to everybody and people would provide their inputs as and when they felt right, it would come through. Start in Jan, finish in June. When the output came, nobody would be even interested in the output. And it was sort of put aside, right? And then 2008 crisis happened. So we had not done great scenario planning. That's why banks got shown up. So we all banks, I'm not saying we, the industry got called out, and then it became prescriptive, right? It became prescriptive scenarios. And okay, we did all of that, and then you're talking about incomplete decisions. If you knew how to do excellent scenario planning or stress testing, why did we not ever predict an event like a COVID scenario? Why were we found wanting? Because all of us, and this is if you guys read, you know Daniel Kahneman. How many people know Daniel Kahneman here? One of the greatest economists of our time, right? He actually took his own life in 91, not as in suicide, he died by assisted suicide just earlier this year. So he says everything that we want to see is we see ourselves coming out as winners. So somebody told me in Singapore, who served in the Singapore army, that they do war games. And whenever they end up doing the war games, the Singapore army always wins at the end of the day, right? So that's how we all did our planning, and we did not look at the unknowns. That's how we never built a scenario like the COVID scenario where we can fail, where we don't know what to do. But again, COVID taught us, and the same scenario testing and planning, that what used to take 6 months for me when I started, what started becoming a 2-month activity, can now be turned around in a single day, where the entire firm comes together, and FP&A is at the center of it, right? Everybody provides inputs, be it credit. Look at financial risks, look at non-financial risks, look at functions, cost, revenue, everything. Everybody provides input. Ultimately, I'll rely on the FP&A team to pull the information together, right? So it's changed so much that outside forces have compelled us to turn around. But even then, you don't have 100% certainty. Even then, we would not maybe predict an unpredictable scenario. And that's where AI has come in. So it now gives us so many multiple scenarios so quickly that even if we were to negate a scenario in what we were trying to build, we would include it. And then we would have to build to solve for that problem. So the thing has sort of evolved. It's not about making decisions with 100% certainty, but you have so much information. Now, decision making is more important. How would you do scenario management? How will you actually deal with the situation, which is the outcome? So things have moved along very well. But again, cutting short in time, but really leaving so much for management to take decisions and then try out those decisions quickly and turn it around. So it's interesting.
We've covered a lot on FP&A. What do you think about the other finance career paths that's available to any accounting or finance student who steps out after graduating? How do you think the landscape has changed in terms of opportunities from the time that you started your career?
It's interesting, right? So when I started out, like I said, now almost 25 years back, it was very traditional. You would look at finance as a back office function. You would pretty much do accounting. Maybe you did accounts payables, account receivables. That was also managed by finance. And business partnering was little, but in foreign banks it was very evolved, but not so much in every other place. So people tended to do lower level analyst roles, putting together data, collecting information, trying to present reports to seniors, and seniors took decisions, so on and so forth. So that was the junior role. Now, if I look to hire in the market, those roles are no more available as well, right? So a lot of this stuff where people learned by doing on the job. Somebody saw a senior and they told them to pull a report. They went to systems, pulled those reports, made a dashboard, took it to somebody, got some feedback. All of that is now readily available, right? So you don't have the regular entry path to learn by doing the low-end roles, which gave people like me experience to understand the lower-end roles. But equally, I worry a lot because when I speak to, not to bachelor level, but even to MBA level students, that you then develop preconceived notions that this is what is available, this is what I will go and do. They say, I want to join an investment bank, right? I want to do this. But why you want to do something should be really important. You need to ask yourself the question, what's the career available? So hardcore accounting roles are available. Obviously, there are auditing accounting firms. Even finance firms have accounting functions. But by and large, we will have less need for low-end analysis, right? So you have to bring something else to the table. So if you're targeting a bank, you need to know what the business model of a bank, as to how you will make a difference when you join a bank. It is not about what you will do in your isolated finance role. What do you bring to the table and how does the bank function and how will you make a difference? So you have to now augment not only your technical skills but also bring your business skills together. So once you bring those business skills, and FP&A can be a good career path because then it is all about business skills, interfacing with other functions, and then picking up from there. And more so for I believe this cohort, which is not a CA cohort or anything, right?
So actually, here in the university, if you have an accounting degree, you get exemptions for ACCA.
Okay.
So most accounting students, they tend to pursue the ACCA qualification.
That's nice. Okay, that's nice. So getting a certified accountancy qualification will mark you out as somebody with a skill set which is defined. But trust me, once you cross the line, you're in the industry, all of this doesn't matter. It is about how you work on the job, how you can make a difference, how you interface with other people, and how actually the biggest thing that you need to do is to solve problems. Put up your hand to take up any challenge and solve problems. So those are the critical skills. The traditional roles of low-end analyst roles are falling away. That is hard, but equally so, maybe there's a need for somebody to interpret what data is coming out, how it will be applied in the actual world. So you'll have to jump one level higher. Without doing the lower level work, you need to understand why it was done that way and how the data has come about, and then apply it in your job. So those are the roles which will be available in the future.
You spoke about AI and disruption of certain roles, especially the low-level analyst roles. Do you think there are new roles being created because of AI, and should students look out for these and try and practice for them beforehand or develop a skill set?
Yeah, I have this sort of story about AI, right? So Steve Jobs in 1983, story, you can go look up the video in the conference, he mentioned the story. He met somebody who was 80 years old, and this is 1983, he met somebody who was 80 years old. He'd worked as a telephone operator. You guys maybe have never even used landline phones, but a telephone operator was somebody who would go from farm to farm in the US, that is, pull two wires from a pole and connect it to a landline phone in somebody's home. That's how people were getting phone connections back in the day. So one day, this farmer went around, the farms, he installed a phone in an Italian man's home. That Italian man had never seen a telephone before, right? So he asked the telephone operator, "Can I speak Italian on this phone?" Of course, he had no clue, so that's the question he asked him. So he said, "Oh, that'll be $50 extra. I have to pull another line from the pole and put it to your home." That's how we are with AI. Whenever a new technology comes, it takes a long time for us to understand what to ask, what to do. But we want to do everything with it, right? We don't understand the capabilities and limitations of AI yet, but we want to do everything with AI. So it's all very good. It's all very good to keep trying. But in a bank, in finance, compliance and regulation is far more important than getting some automation or producing something faster. So it will take a while, right? So in the banking industry, let me give you an example about AI. So if you look at, you guys are used to graphs and stuff like that. Let's look at ease of implementing something and the business impact of doing something. Let's say business impact on this axis and ease of implementing on the x-axis. So what have we done with AI? We have done technically feasible, very easy, customer service, front office, sales management. We have done maybe underwriting, stuff like that. That's technically feasible and it still has very easy, high business impact. The business impact which will be the most is in our area. For the bank, I'm telling you, regulation costs us the most. Regulatory compliance. So AI, to get there, is a bridge too far. And I'll tell you why too far. Because in 2008, when banks went through the crisis, there was a big regulation which came in around banks providing capital on assets. And that's providing, when you say capital on assets, when you book assets on your balance sheet, there's a risk weight for that asset, and then you consume capital, right? So, and you have to be well capitalized, so you will lend to the right segment, you will carry the least weight of risk weight assets and so on. Banks since then have been lobbying the regulators with years worth of data to show that they don't need to apply standardized principles. They can apply different principles to get to the outcome. Despite that, the regulator has not given, I'm not talking this jurisdiction, I'm talking evolved ECB jurisdictions, given their go-ahead for different models. Do you think they will give go-ahead for AI models where they don't understand what's behind? We're able to explain our current models, the flow through the beginning to the end, and still regulators are not comfortable. So AI has to be completely transparent. You need to understand and explainable from beginning to end, and then get everybody on board. So it's a long shot. So AI is not taking away the real thinking jobs. Absolutely not. AI will help automate, but you still have to check and verify. You still have to be creative at your job, and you have to come up with solutions on your own, because solutions are not, it's not a straight equation, right? Solutions are also intuitive. Solutions are not straightforward. So, yeah, another story maybe, and it's intuitive. I don't know which period, this is something I heard, so I don't know which period. So when the original lifts were installed, elevators are installed in buildings in the US, people started complaining after a while that it took too much time to go down up the elevators, that they just were upset, and then people needed to find faster motors, quicker elevators, door needed to open faster. People started solving for all sorts of things. But one person came up with a solution, and you'll all accept it when I tell you this. He came up with a solution that the people did not have anything to do when they went to the elevator or waited for the elevator. So he suggested install mirrors inside the elevator and outside in the lobby, so that people would do something else. They would find time to look at their hair, set their dress, whatever, right? So they did not need to complain about the elevator. They didn't need faster motors. They didn't need faster elevators. They just needed to do something. They were not distracted by phones up those days, right? So it's an intuitive solution. You think AI will give you that solution? AI will tell you how much faster, what better elevators have to run. So you have to come up with those out-of-the-box solutions. You have to get away from traditional structures and actually think through a solution. And that creativity, problem solving is going to be with us. That's not going to go away. That's absolutely our gift.
So you spoke about the banking industry, and you said AI is not deeply permeated as of yet. And because banking is unique and heavily regulated versus other businesses, what about the other finance jobs, for instance, investment banking jobs? Do you think investment banking firms have started to use AI to automate a lot of tasks? For instance,
Yeah, so this Goldman Sachs is on record saying that they can produce their pitch deck almost 95% ready with AI. It's nothing wrong. It's true. But once that deck is produced, the last 5% becomes so much more important as to why you're different from somebody else. If everybody is going to produce a similar thing, then where do you differentiate yourself? So the fine line of distinction, of differentiation becomes so much more important. So it will absolutely take away these analyst jobs. It is again the same point I'm telling you. That people who learned investment banking by doing the hard grind, by doing those pitch decks, yes, I'm not trying to glorify hard work, but they learned the job doing that. Now those jobs are not going to be available. Correct? So you have to naturally be able to get yourself to the next level. Now that you have availability of information, you know what happens. So you need to be able to envisage what will it be if you were to do that role and actually try to get to that level. So another thing I keep talking about very often is technology is going to be very fast, right? Education is never going to keep pace with technology and what change is coming through. So you have to take ownership of your own career. What you learn here from your professors is all good, but you have to learn a lot more on your own. If you've chosen investment banking as your career, then by all means, reach out to senior investment bankers, connect with them, understand what it is like a day job for them, and try to pick up on that. So it is so much about people and networking and understanding things.
Last year, we had the UOWD Finance Forum, and one of our guests was director from Emirates and BD's investment banking function. So I asked him this question. I said, does this talk about AI? Everyone's talking about AI all around the world, but are firms using it a lot? And then what he said was, yes, there's been talks about AI being implemented, but it will take a lot of time till we start using it. Now, in your example, you mentioned Goldman Sachs. They said they're going to use it for pitch books. What do you think about in Dubai? How long will it take for firms, investment banking firms, to trust it, to use AI for pitch books, not only pitch books, but financial modeling, the stuff what normally young associates do?
So that's what I said in banks, unless what I call AI is explainable and transparent, you will not be able to build AI into your models, because unless you understand why something happened, you will not be able to clean the data or look at some bias, or if something has gone wrong, if you cannot go underneath and pick out the issue, it doesn't make sense, right? So it doesn't make sense unless it's fully transparent, fully validated, that we can confidently say this is 100% right. You will not implement something like it. It's a good thing to have as something to check with, but not fully implement in our activities, not at all.
So this means that students should still focus on core fundamental skills, like, for instance, financial modeling.
If you don't have the core skills, you cannot question the output, right? If all that you're going to do is always take the output and run with it, but if you never understood how it came together, that's a given. You need to have the fundamental understanding to be able to ask the right questions. So just like the Italian farmer, you need to ask the question, but you need to know what question to ask. Right? So to know what question to ask, you need to know the beast you're dealing with. So your fundamentals are very important. There is no getting away from fundamentals, but you may not do the fundamentals as a transactional activity, but you should know why something is working the way it is, because you've gone through the grind. So if you get sort of step by this process, then you will not benefit. You have to go through this grind.
I want to talk a little bit about the educational aspect. So most accounting students, the moment they graduate, they tend to pursue a chartered accountancy certification like the ACCA or ICAEW. We've seen increasingly many finance students now look to pursue the CFA. I think about 20 years ago, they used to say that the ticket to investment banking is a good MBA in finance. So there's this huge conundrum about whether one should go, especially in finance, where it's not very clear. In accounting, it's a given that you need chartered accountancy certification. What would your advice be to finance students? Should they look to do a CFA or a good master's or MBA in finance? What do you notice in this region specifically?
So I'll give practical examples. I have people in my team who are rank holding CAs and CFAs, both degrees. I have people who are science graduates and are running the financial control function for me. Right? And I tell you, people don't know why they do certain degrees. If you don't know why you're doing certain degrees, don't do it. So even when a couple of people did the CFAs and I told them, if you're not going to be using it in your work life, it's all very well going through the hard work and saying, there's a rigor, there's an approach, I learned so much and I have a degree against my name. But if it is not going to lead to something, just something for the sake of it, no, I don't buy it at all. I don't buy it. And CFA is largely, in my view, losing its importance because there are so many people coming out at CFAs that what used to be differentiated is no more a differentiator. But I don't think jobs are also exclusively advertised as only if you have a CFA you get a job. I don't think it's gone to that level yet. What you need to know is if you absolutely want to be in investment banking, and you know you have a career pathway into investment banking. And the simple fact of the matter, it's a very bitter truth, that investment banking is not for everybody. It's not a joke. The kind of graduates that we pick in investment bank, out of thousands of people who apply for the jobs, we may pick 5 or 10 every year. So it's not a joke. It's a tough path, and not everybody is going to get there. So you have to find more meaningful opportunities. And for more meaningful opportunities, life has never been better than today. You have startups, you have fintechs, whatnot. So the opportunity set is so much larger than what was defined by, like I started by saying, my traditional path of doing an engineering MBA or whatever. So I would not suggest do any certification just for the sake of it. Unless you're clear, you're already on that path, and that is what you want to do. If you do an ACCA, it will give you a good understanding of finance fundamentals. Okay, that's still fine. But CFA is a very specialized course. Why would you do CFA if you ultimately are not going to end up in an investment bank or a trading desk or a treasury job at the end of the day? It's good to have knowledge, but equally in the pursuit of the knowledge, you can't lose several years spending trying to get the knowledge.
I think that's a very good point you made, because I meet students frequently and then they say, I'm looking to do the CFA, I'm looking to pursue ACCA, but when you ask them, where do you want to end up with, they don't have the answer to this question.
I say this loosely, the collectivist culture people have an affinity to add degrees and certifications to the name. They're not worth anything, I'm telling you. These gold CFAs in my team are not half as good as the person who's done finance with zero finance understanding but has learned everything on the job and actually applies critical thinking as opposed to academic thinking, right? So skill sets which are going to differentiate us are what you know on the job, how you apply it to the job. Not everything is good, but what you make of it is what is important. But don't waste your time on a certification, spending your lifetime getting a certification, which is not going to be useful.
What do you think about the MBAs? We've seen a lot of universities now offer MBAs, unlike a few years ago where it was only the prestigious ones. So people have come to think that the MBA has lost its worth. Do you think it is worth it, let's say, to do an MBA when you're around 28 or 30 and looking for career growth?
See, two things, and where you learn the most is when you're challenged. And when I say challenged, if you people think the person sitting next to you is challenging you to be a better person, is trying to do better than you, and you're trying to be better than them in a right way, not trying to pull somebody down, but trying to be better than them, then everybody will rise. So when I did B school back in the day, it was very competitive. But where I learned most was in my job, where there were about 5 people similar to me. I was the only MBA, they were all CAs. I was the only MBA, and you would not get inside Citibank's finance team if you had not done CA in the first attempt. You would not even get an interview. So I was the only MBA within that the 30-member team. But each one of us pushed the other person, and we tried to shine in our own way. That collectively we lifted ourselves. So you will learn. And the same happens in the right MBA cohort. Because people come with experiences, people come with background, and they can collectively lift the other person because of the viewpoints they bring. Going fresh out of school into an MBA, I did that. I'm telling you, I would never suggest it. I would never suggest it. Because once you go into the industry, you understand how industry works, and then you bring a different perspective, and then you apply it to your job. I think that's the best. And I would not say MBA has lost its luster, but that's the point. If you have the correct mix of people and do it in the right place where you are going to get more people who are going to push you to be a better person. That is absolutely key. These prestigious institutions are not prestigious because the profs are great. It is because the people they attract are the best, and they're going to push everybody to be better and better, right? So it's better to do a degree, get into the industry, garner specific experience, and then target also a B school in your chosen field of expertise in the future. So MBA is absolutely good, but at the right time in the career and at the right place. So again, generic MBAs, we have a habit of adding degrees to our CV, right? It doesn't make any difference. Ultimately, who you are unravels in a few minutes of talking to somebody, regardless of what degrees you bring. Because if you ask the same question 3-4 different ways, you will understand what the person understands or doesn't understand.
So speaking of challenges, students often face a conundrum when it comes to getting high grades or looking for internships. Sometimes doing internships while you're in your undergraduate course can come at the cost of losing out a few marks. What would be your advice? Should students at the undergraduate level actively look for internships or look to be top graduate?
Especially for your, I have my son who's just going to get into college anyway, like you guys. So the thing is, you need experiences. You think you already know a lot. Whenever I speak to anybody, you talk as if you know a lot because you have so much information. But you also have preconceived notions of how things work. That's why you want to say, go and work in an investment bank. You must be watching something somebody is saying, driving a flashy vehicle or whatever, right? So you think that's great. I want to go into investment bank. That what internship provides is the window into what's the real world. That cannot be replicated by students. But one should not be at the expense of the other. Why should you not get good grades just because you do internships? So there is no substitute to hard work, and that is a given. Why should be one at the expense of the other? I would suggest, and I get so many people asking me for internships. Not everybody offers internships, right? That's the truth. But you have to keep asking. If you don't ask, you will not get. And life is so democratic today. You can reach out to anybody on LinkedIn and ask them. They don't take offense. If they take offense, they don't speak to you. No big deal. But if you don't ask, you don't get. Right? So you have to do it. You have to put yourself out there and try to get those internships and better to work in a startup. Because you will not learn only one aspect of business. If you come and join me in finance, I might give you a specific role to support somebody and do some analysis. Or you'll only learn finance. If you go to a startup, you'll learn how the business is working, why the startup is doing what it's doing. You'll learn a bit of finance, you'll learn a bit of something else. Getting business acumen is more important than technical acumen. Technical acumen built here in the institute. But try to understand how businesses work, what are the drivers, why things are the way they are, and why they're successful. And grow with the business. So you can grow with the business challenge. So for me, internships are very key. They're just very simply non-negotiable.
I think that's very interesting. What you mentioned is working in startups. We see students, most finance and accounting students, it's their dream to work in the Big Four or in investment banking. What do you think, what are some of the common mistakes they make, especially in this competitive environment? We've also seen increasing emeritization at private firms, which is a good thing, but it makes it more competitive for expats. How should they distinguish themselves to get these internships in such a competitive environment?
you see, each one is bespoke, right? But you have to have your sort of personality and brand visible online, right? I don't know how many of you have a LinkedIn profile and what you write on LinkedIn or whatever, but coordinate, comment on relevant posts, build a narrative around who you are, so that there's an understanding of what you bring to the table. And that will naturally connect you to more and more people, and you follow relevant people, right? You follow relevant people in the industry and build it. And then when you have a individual personal brand, you can bring that to the table in the conversation, and that becomes very key. The differentiator here is, it's absolutely true. I see MBA school students asking me for internships, still struggling to get through internships. It is difficult, but I have also seen equally persistent students who have kept reaching. You have to reach out to people. It doesn't go away. Emiratisation is very, very true. But this is not yet Saudi, where there's an absolute big local population which needs to be employed, right? There's very little local population. There is so much of roles to be done if one is able to put up their hand for it. Try to, that's why I said, research the company, try to understand and say what you will do for the company. If you think there is something that you spot as an opportunity set, you can bring a solution, then craft a narrative, then write to somebody. Reach out to somebody and say, I can help you with this, something that I'm built on. So there are multiple ways for the person who's curious, who's engaged, who wants to build. But nothing will be handed to you on a platter. Forget it. Those days are gone. Because I've done my degree, because I've done my MBA, I deserve something. Those days are gone. That's not going to happen anymore. So anything which builds your learning, anything which builds your personality, keep doing. And maybe the word is not shameless, but shamelessly network. Reach out to everybody. There is nothing wrong. Right? Reach out, connect, ask questions, engage. There are so many people who reach out to me. I may engage with some, I'm not engaged with some, but whatever engagement they get, they benefit. Right?
I think what you mentioned is absolutely crucial. You mentioned LinkedIn. I think everyone here will have an Instagram account, but not everyone has a LinkedIn account. And
that's itself telling, right? That's itself telling as to where your priorities are, sort of.
And not just having a LinkedIn account, what we also notice is on LinkedIn, you see many unnecessary posts at times. We see people on LinkedIn post a certificate that they got for doing some 2 hours of online training. What would your message be to students? How should they distinguish themselves on LinkedIn? And even when it comes to networking and reaching out to people, it's an art. Many students sometimes reach out to managers and directors and just directly ask for a job.
See, this is a very nice question, and I'm friends with somebody who actually ran a CFA institute, sold it to somebody for millions, and now runs. He's an author, and he runs some sessions. Few of us get together. I think
I know him.
Yeah, you understand who it is. So we chat about everything. We chat about everything which is non-corporate life. We chat about everything, and then we say the same thing. That he says, some student of mine 7 years back, I helped him do a CFA charter. He reaches out to me without any background, just saying, "Can you help me?" So why should I help you? What did you do for me? These 7 years, you never even reached out to me, or even said hi, hello, and what you meant to me. So unless you are of some use to somebody, why will that somebody do something for you? It's as simple as that, right? You can't reach out to somebody, connect in the next moment, say, here's my CV, find me a job. How can you do that to a stranger? You cannot do that to a stranger, right? So you have to connect, you have to ask. Some people ask for a catch up for a coffee. Do it. Understand how the industry works. You do some research and you tell them something. And that, if in 1 in 100 you end up meeting somebody, that person can change your career. So it has to be an intentional way. Very intentional. It's not like, what is the thing they say? Spray and pray, right? You do everything and then something will work out. It's not going to work out that way. So you have to be very, very careful, very studied, and not lose your own brand, right? Going back just to anybody and then saying, just give me a job, you lose your self-worth. What is the meaning? Clearly go with a thought process. What is it that you do? What can you bring to them? And that is the most important thing. If you ask me what helped me most in my career, it is about putting up hands and saying, I'll solve problems for other people. What people don't want to do, you take those jobs and do it. If you succeed, then your career is fast-tracked, big time. It's not my job, I will not do it. Most important thing is I will do something. And to do something, you have to be of usefulness to somebody else.
I want to talk a little bit about actually working in the field of finance. We see a lot of students talking about their dream job being in investment banking. But very few of them are aware of what investment banking actually entails. It could entail working 3 or 4 long weekends. It could also entail dealing sometimes with difficult managers. What would your advice be to students to look out for before thinking about a job in investment banking where long hours come with the turf?
See, ultimately, like I said, it's long hours, whatever it is. If you are motivated by something, it will not feel like a chore. You will do it happily, right? You will not find it a pain. What causes stress is when you think I shouldn't be doing something, then I'm doing something. So, in my initial days, like I mentioned, we used to do, I remember even going home at 5 o'clock in the morning and then coming back at 7 or 8 o'clock to do work, but it never felt stressful because you felt like you were building something. It felt like you were part of the process. So when you're part of the process, it's not a pain. But if you get into something which doesn't actually work for you and you're getting it for the sake of getting into it, like investment banking, like I'm repeating and I hear this word investment banking so much, being inside tells me it's not a joke. Not everybody's going to get in anyway. Yeah. Right? 95% of the people are not going to get in. So it might as well mean that you focus on something which is more meaningful. Right? You work to build your skill set in something else which is more meaningful. Because if the big bulge bracket investment banks are not going to look at it, then you need to look at very small banks where you can do, like a startup, you can do a lot more work, right? So maybe you look at something like that. But about people, it's very important. If you're useful to somebody and you're going to make a difference to their life, like I keep repeating, then again, it will not be stressful. If you are being defensive, if somebody is being unreasonable, those days are gone. Those days are gone after this COVID, work from home and stuff like that. I don't think it is so strenuous, but it is intensive for sure.
What about dealing with managers and people in general? Being in the finance industry, especially when it comes to consulting, you would have to work with a team and deal with managers. At times, some managers can be too difficult. There's at times also workplace bullying issues, which often don't get characterized as workplace bullying. And when people are just new into a company, they try to prove a point, so they might, do the long hours. But we also heard a lot of news recently about at times when things get extreme, young associates losing their lives due to overwork. How should students draw the line, and even via communication, what would your advice be dealing with people?
It's a good one. I'll take it in 2 parts. I'll address one as probably stakeholder management and address the other one as drawing boundaries, right? So stakeholder management is interesting. At least back in the day when I was a kid, there was this story. I don't know if you guys heard this story. So there were these 6 blind men in a village, and of course they were blind. They did not know how the world looked. They would argue about everything. And somebody told them that an elephant was a very ferocious animal. It could trample you, so on and so forth. And they argued as to what the elephant could be. So wherever the blind men were, the villagers got frustrated with their arguing. They took them to king's palace to see, but not see obviously, to feel the elephant. So each person reached out and touched the elephant and somebody pulled the tail, somebody tried to pull the trunk, somebody pulled the ears, somebody felt the body of the elephant, somebody did the leg, and so on and so forth. And all done, and they started arguing. Somebody said the elephant is like a rope because they pulled the tail. Somebody was touching the leg. They said, no, it's just like a tree. And somebody said, no, it's like a wall. It's like a very big wall, right? Somebody said, no, it's a pipe, right? I'm pulling the trunk. And somebody said, it's a fan. And then the king came and told them, you're all right, but you're only seeing parts of the elephant. But when you put everything together, this is how it looks. So that is stakeholder management in an office. And when you go to an office, everybody's trying to work together. But they have their own motivation, their own perspective, their own desires to see. And they're still seeing the same picture. But they will tell you their story. It is for you to understand where who is coming from and address them in their language. And that's the FP&A bit that you want. So when FP&A gets into the job and they know a problem is like this, they have to communicate to each department differently, tell each person the same story. You know that person understands what an ear is like, so you explain it to him like that. Somebody understands what the rope is like, so you explain it to him like that. Right? So stakeholder management is mapping stakeholders, understanding what their desires and motivations are, and then appealing to each person differently. And it is, again, non-negotiable. You cannot expect to go there and somebody to treat you with kid gloves. It's not going to happen. Right? I might be able to speak to you nicely here, but if you came and work for me in a very stressful scenario, I might say something for you which may feel hurt.
It's very important to develop a thick skin as well.
Not necessary. It is not about, I may not shout at you, I may not be bad with you, but you may feel that I'm not giving you my time, but it's not going to happen. So you have to understand what works for whom at that point of time and then tailor your expectations accordingly so that you are able to manage everybody, right? So that sort of stakeholder mapping and then stakeholder management, bringing it together. And the same thing also works for solutionizing. What kind of solutions can you do? You know that person is struggling. He likes the rope, but his rope is not fine. But what can I do for him? If you do something for that person, they may do something for you. So again, that's growing in your career, stakeholder management. When it comes to drawing boundaries, it's about being clear about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable and saying it in the beginning. Because everybody has a brand. If you first start out by being very pliable, taking on everything and saying, I'll do this also, I'll do that. Tomorrow suddenly you start saying no, it becomes difficult for the other person to understand.
Perceived as if you've changed.
Yeah, it can be a sudden change. But equally so, you have to be very clear as to why, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable and say, this is my boundary. I can operate within this boundary and some things I will say no. That drawing of boundaries is very critical. If you don't do it in the first instance and then suddenly expect somebody to understand that there is a boundary, it won't happen. So tell people this is my boundary. This is the way I'm working. And I found it very common within the Gs. It's very easy. I actually find it, sometimes they only do so much. And that's it. They only will do so much and it doesn't seem to affect them. But it's good. I feel you're so much more self-aware. That's very important. You must be self-aware. And then when you say it, it's acceptable. But if you don't say it, then it is not implicitly understood. So draw your own boundaries. Be very clear what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and do it in the first instance. If you don't do it, later it will become difficult because you are now understood as a particular brand, particular person. You can't change it. But yeah, it is important, and you guys are lucky in the sense you have so much information and knowledge when you get in. So it will be easy for you to draw that boundary.
So Mr. Ram, we've spoken about finance careers, the technical aspects, the people skills. What would your final parting words of wisdom be to our students who are very soon going to step into the corporate world?
Yeah, I'll re-emphasize this point, right? Solve problems, put up your hand for challenging situations, and find a way to make yourself useful to somebody. There are n number of people equally talented, maybe more talented, right? So how will you differentiate yourself? If you want somebody to do something for you, you have to do something for them. And that is by being useful in the workplace, really doing something different, which makes it easier for everybody else. And when you enter the workplace, be curious, right? And there is this Japanese term, it's called shoshin, right? So it basically says, be free of any other mindset. When your child goes and touches something, The child goes into full innocence of wanting to learn what it is about. So have a beginner's mindset of fully absorbing whatever you see. Don't, because I'm repeating, you have already preconceived notions. You expect things that you see or read online to be as they are in the workplace. They will not be. Go with a complete learning mindset and keep sharpening the saw. You have to learn on your own. Learn, absorb, grow, but be very curious and solve problems for somebody. And then that will help you open doors. And once you open doors and you are in the right place, build your career there. If it is not right, quit early, right? If you don't quit early, that again makes a big problem in your career to restart your career. Don't be at some place just for the sake of it. At least in early days, if you understand something is not working out, switch directions as well.
I think that's a very lovely message to end with. Seek ways to wherein you can be of help to others as well, because very often we tend to go in with a selfish attitude, look at how we can benefit ourselves. So providing yourself as a solution or seeking ways whereby you can help others will also take you a long way. Mr. Ram, I'd like to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.